The Guide's Platinum Picture Awards 2020. It's where we tell you everything that's going to go on at the Oscars. Not really. So essentially, the Oscars are coming out tonight, so we're having our little special what should really happen at the Oscars party, which they've done, obviously film critics have done for forever, and some of my favorites growing up, Siskel and Ebert, did our what we really think should have happened at the Oscars. So this is my version of that, which we're calling The Guide's Platinum Pictures 2020. So what are the Platinum Pictures, you ask? Well, essentially, they are the ones that are already nominated, so we're not going to go back and rehash whether a film should have been nominated or not. There's one film out there that I definitely believe should have been nominated for some more awards, but it wasn't. So I can't really go back and say, this is what should have been done. Actually, if you take a look at a post that I have at the very end of December, it was my best nominated pictures up to that point. Of course, 1917 came out there, and of course, some of the other films that I hadn't had the opportunity to see were not available. So you can take that for what you will. I don't think it's worth rehashing. I just think we should go over what's there and what we think should win at the Oscars this year in 2020. We'll begin with Best Animated Feature Film of the Year. This year's animated feature films did have some noticeable exceptions to their rules. Of course, they didn't happen to do Frozen 2, which seems to be the most popular animated film of the year, but that's coming on the sequel, and sequels, with the exception of The Godfather 2, rarely actually make it in. However, we did have two sequels that did make it in this year to the animated film category. We had both Toy Story 4 and we had How to Train Your Dragon 3. So the fact that Frozen 2 did not make it is a notable exception. I'm curious as to why Hollywood actually did that, but we'll not rehash that right now. What I will do is look at that and some of the other ones, Missing Link, and some other foreign ones which are out there, including Klaus and I Lost My Body. If I were to pick one for this year, I would have to go with Toy Story 4. I don't think it's as good as Toy Story 3, which, to be perfectly honest, but at the same time, it still moved me in a way that none of the other films quite did. It moved me to tears. It's the culmination of so many different years of animated excellence by the Pixar studio, and it means another one for Pixar if we were voting. So our winner for our Platinum Picture in 2020 for animated film would be Toy Story 4. For our second Platinum Picture of the evening, we're going to be covering cinematography, which there's some very interesting cinematography this year. Some overdone, some are understated, but definitely some interesting things on the list. So let's go with the nominees for this year in 2020. Number 1, it's The Irishman, done by Rodrigo Prieto, and it's the Martin Scorsese 3.5-hour epic, which I'll get into later on. Number 2 is Lawrence Sher doing Joker, definitely an understated, gritty, almost crime drama in the vein of Taxi Driver, only thinking of it in the DC comic universe, definitely different. Number 3 is The Lighthouse by Jarin Balashki. Number 4 would be 1917 by Roger Deakins. Definitely an interesting cinematography, considering that I would say the whole film was probably shot in 3 shots. I know they like to say that it was one big long take, but given the fact that they went from daytime to nighttime, that's a little bit impossible. However, it was well done. And number 5 on the list would be Robert Richardson for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Of all of the lists this year, I'd have to say this is one of my most difficult, just because of the different things that they had to do, and every one of them had their good sides and their bad sides. I would have to say that if I was going to give one thing for just the cinematic effort of trying to carry a film in 3 shots, I'm going to have to give it this year to 1917 and Roger Deakins. Congratulations for your Platinum Picture. Third Platinum Picture of 2020, we're going to cover Best Original Screenplay. As you notice, we could be doing a lot more things, but I think it would just take way too long. So we're going to go right to the screenplays, and we're going to go to Best Original Screenplay. Number 1 is 1917 by Sam Mendes and Christy Wilson Cairns. It's definitely the story of at least one and possibly two guys going in to try to stop a crazy attack in World War I. If you know everything about World War I, this is definitely an interesting picture. Number 2 is Knives Out, written by Rian Johnson, the hilarious film that I definitely believe was shortchanged this year with only one Oscar. He did an amazing job with a kind of all-star cast in weaving this funny, interesting tale. Definitely takes me back to the days of Clue. Number 3 is Marriage Story, written by Noah Baumbach. I know it's received a lot of interesting publicity this year, straight from Netflix, and then you're able to see it in a couple of different theaters throughout the year, or else it wouldn't exist for the Academy Awards. With Adam Driver and an all-star cast, definitely an interesting story, not really about marriage though, more about divorce. Number 4 is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood by Quentin Tarantino. And if you love Hollywood and you love taking everything back to the days of good old Hollywood and all of its craziness and kind of that like in-between time, right between the time where the studios carried everything into the time where the actors and everyone else had more of their personal style, and we go into the kind of desperate lives of Charlie Manson and his gang. And of course everything gets twisted around because no Quentin Tarantino movie would be good unless life were totally different than in reality. Finally, we have Parasite, with a screenplay by Bong Joon-ho and Han Jin-won. It's a hilarious tale of greed, class discrimination, and a mysterious interloper threaten the newly formed symbiotic relationship between the wealthy Park family and the destitute Kim clan. Definitely hilarious in its own way. For our Platinum Picture of the Year at the Guide, we will be going with Knives Out by Rian Johnson. Maybe it's just because we feel like that they were shortchanged with all of the different Oscar possibilities out there and they only got one nomination. But truthfully, just the sheer amount of brilliance between all of the different characters and carrying them all together. Definitely, if I was going to give a second place, it would be Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But definitely for me, Knives Out would be number 1. For our 4th Platinum Picture of the Year, we have Writing Adapted Screenplay from another source. We first begin with The Irishman by Stephen Zalian. The Irishman is the tale as an old man World War II vet, Frank Sheeran reflects on his life as a hustler and a mob hitman, working alongside many notorious figures throughout history, including Jimmy Hoffa, the subject of one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history. And really, really long. Definitely the Martin Scorsese piece that's worth a watch, but it's 3.5 hours long, so if you can get through it, you'll do better than I did. Number 2, Jojo Rabbit, with screenplay by Taika Waititi, who actually stars in it as the kind of, well, he's not the main star, but he's definitely a side character as the envisionment of Hitler to the boy's imagination. During World War II, Jojo Rabbit is about a lonely German boy's world is turned upside down when he discovers that his single mother is hiding a young Jew in the attic when he's trying to be a good Nazi. Aided by only his idiotic imaginary friend Adolf Hitler, Jojo must confront his blind nationalism. What will happen? Definitely some interesting stars and definitely an interesting piece. Number 3, Joker, written by Todd Phillips and Scott Silver. Joker, of course, is the tale of Gotham's crazed lunatic who seems to have a smile on his face all the time. In this story, it's about a young man who wants to be a stand-up comic but finds the joke is always on him. Caught in a cycle of apathy and ultimately betrayal, the comedian makes one bad decision after another, bringing a chain of events to occur with a shocking conclusion. Next is Little Women, written for the screen by Greta Gerwig. In this late 1860s tale, burgeoning author Jo March looks back on her and her 3 sisters' Massachusetts childhood and the events and relationships that helped them as adults. Definitely a little different take on the Little Women. Not that this is bad, it's just a different take on the story, and for sure an interesting tale. And finally, we have The Two Popes, written by Anthony McCartan. In 2012, it's a retrospective of Pope Benedict and his harshest critic, Cardinal Bergoglio, engage in a deep, revelatory discussion about the state of the Catholic Church and their future as leaders. Starring Jonathan Pryce and Anthony Hopkins as the two popes. I definitely had a difficult time this time trying to decide between all the different films. I believe that they were well worth it and definitely interesting, but if I was going to pick one, I would have to go with The Joker. Definitely an understated film dealing with the psychosis of a man, and just the sheer ability to take a film that could be huge and make it into a small, amazing little piece. The writing is just incredible, and the performance by Joaquin Phoenix just does amazing, which we'll get to later. Our fifth nominee for a Platinum Picture. At the Guide, we are getting into the Best Supporting Actress category with a plethora of wonderful performances by amazing women. This year, the first nominee is Kathy Bates in Richard Jewell. It's the true story of a man being put upon by the FBI and accused of a crime with which he didn't commit. Kathy Bates plays the mom of Richard Jewell, just trying to protect her son from all the crazies that are going on around her. Number 2 is Laura Dern in A Marriage Story, which is about a young creative couple and they navigate the tricky waters of a bi-coastal separation and divorce. Plays the role of Scarlett Johansson's wife, aggrieved and trying to deal with the disillusion of their marriage. For the third nominee in the category, it's Scarlett Johansson as the mother of Jojo in Jojo Rabbit. She is the woman trying to teach Jojo about the meaning of life and trying to teach Jojo about how all humanity is worth preserving and saving in some way or another. Trying to spare him and keep him innocent in the midst of all of the craziness that's going on throughout Germany at the end of the war. Unfortunately, things do not go well for her or her son. The next is Florence Pugh in Little Women. She plays Amy March. She is the one who's trying to keep her family together and trying to do all of the right things, trying to do what she's taught, and then at the same time somehow maintain a part of who she is. Finally, there's Margot Robbie in Bombshell, the tale about 3 women dealing with the controversy of everything that's going on at Fox News, especially when Roger Ailes was sexually harassing many different women around the office. She plays one of the leading women in the role. I know I probably won't be going with the typical Hollywood choice for this year, but if I was to choose any of them with a strong role and who performed it to the best of her ability, I would go with Florence Pugh in Little Women. She did an amazing take on Amy and definitely dealt with the various different aspects of her character, trying to see Jo in the strong women's role, but at the same time seeing her own role in society, trying to blend characters, just does an amazing role. So congratulations to you, Florence from The Guide, for your take as Amy. Sixth category, we will be covering the Best Supporting Actor for the films. Most of the films we've already covered already, so we won't get too much into them. We'll just go straight and to the point. Number 1, it's Tom Hanks as Fred Rogers in A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. I know we didn't cover this already, but this is Tom Hanks taking on the role of the passive and somewhat downplayed man who a newspaper reporter tries to prove that he absolutely isn't the man he claims to be and finds that he's more than just that. Then we have Anthony Hopkins in The Two Popes. We have Al Pacino in The Irishman. Next we have Joe Pesci, also in The Irishman. And finally we have Brad Pitt in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. As much as all of these characters are very interesting, I have to say that Brad Pitt's character stood out to me above them all. Now, if you've ever taken a look at my post on Ad Astra, you'll have an idea of what I think of Brad Pitt when it comes to doing starring roles and character actors. He did the supporting role in this one. Once again, absolutely love him. He is just amazing in the role. He is mesmerizing, and he has kind of this charisma of both the bad guy kind of, and at the same time on the outside, but at the same time he just has some goodness about him. Just an amazing role, and Brad Pitt definitely nails it. So congratulations to you from the guide for your Platinum Picture. Next up, Actress in a Leading Role category. First up, we have Cynthia Erivo as Harriet in Harriet, and she plays Harriet Tubman, which is the story of slave Harriet Tubman escaping from a Maryland plantation and transforming into one of America's most renowned freedom fighters, using her courage and her tenacity to lead hundreds of people in the Underground Railroad. Next up, we have Scarlett Johansson in A Marriage Story. She plays the part of the young creative couple that has to navigate the tricky waters of divorce when it's bi-coastal. Number 3 is Saoirse Ronan in Little Women. She plays Jo March as the strong, independent woman trying to find her place in the world. Number 4 is Charlize Theron in Bombshell. She definitely does an amazing take as Megyn Kelly, is one of the many women at Fox Studios who was put upon during the Fox News days of Roger Ailes. And finally, we have Renee Zellweger in Judy. 30 years after she shot to stardom, showbiz legend Judy Garland arrives in London to perform a 5-week sold-out run of shows. As she prepares her act, fights with management, musicians, and reminisces with friends and fans, her wit and warmth shine through. Definitely an interesting take on the role of Judy Garland. As far as our vote for the best category, I would have to go with Scarlett Johansson in A Marriage Story. I know that many people love it as the best film of the year. I wouldn't go that far. On the other hand, I definitely think that Scarlett Johansson does an amazing job in the story, and she definitely deserves plaudits for her amazing role as the woman having to deal with a marriage that's falling apart. So congratulations to you, Scarlett Johansson. Next up, we have Best Actor in a Leading Role with some amazing performances this year in 2020. So let's get to it. First off, we have Antonio Banderas in Pain and Glory. It's the story of Salvador Malo, a renowned film director, and in physical decline revisits his past childhood with his mother, his first desire, his first adult love and breakup, and the early discovery of the cinema. It's done by Pedro Almodovar, who gets back into his very interesting ways, and Antonio Banderas goes back to starring with him again. Next up, we have Leonardo DiCaprio in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. In Los Angeles in 1969, aging TV star Rick Dalton and his longtime double try to work their way through Hollywood. Leonardo DiCaprio does an amazing job as the actor, and there are some amazing sequences in it. Just a great performance in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Next up is Adam Driver in A Marriage Story. He is the male part of the Scarlett Johansson Adam Driver couple trying to deal with a marriage falling apart. Definitely does amazing in the role. Next up, we have Joaquin Phoenix in just a changing role in the Joker. He does an amazing job of bringing humanity to the role of Joker, and yet at the same time, we're never quite sure to trust our own senses about what we see. Finally, we have Jonathan Pryce being nominated for Best Actor for The Two Popes. He plays Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio, and he goes out to attack Pope Benedict. Of course, he is the future Pope Francis, and he's engaging with Benedict about what he sees as the problem in the church. And so, our guide announces the Best Actor going to Joaquin Phoenix. Now, I know some people will go with Adam Driver, and definitely Leonardo DiCaprio deals with some plaudits, but there's just no one like Joaquin Phoenix. From the moment he's on screen, he mesmerizes. You cannot take your eye off him. He is the whole movie. He makes the whole movie. He imbues the character in such a way that you cannot tell what you think of him from beginning to end. Is he a good guy put upon by society? Is he a bad guy just heading down the road to darkness? Just an amazing job in the Joker, and definitely worth the role. So congratulations to you, Joaquin Phoenix, for your Platinum Picture from the guide. Next up, and our next to last role in the guide's Platinum Pictures, we have Best Director. This year we have some amazing directors in the category. Some people have been there before, some people for the first time, but definitely worth a look. So, number 1, it's Martin Scorsese for The Irishman. Number 2, it's Todd Phillips for The Joker. Number 3, it's Sam Mendes in 1917. Number 4, it's Quentin Tarantino for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Number 5, it's Bong Joon-ho for Parasite. As great as all the films were this year, and whether or not we believe Little Women should have been nominated for Best Director this year, we do think that of all of these films, we will have to go with Quentin Tarantino for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. While all of the films were great and had their amazing parts in certain aspects, we thought that The Irishman went a little too long. As much as we loved The Joker, we think that Joaquin Phoenix really was the role. The directing wasn't as necessary, although it was good. It just wasn't as great as the acting itself. It kind of overrid that. The one amazing thing, as good as Parasite was, the one amazing thing about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is Tarantino's sheer ability to keep so many characters doing so many different things that each imbue the character fully and yet somehow make a coherent story. We loved Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and believe that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Quentin Tarantino should win Best Director this year in 2020. So congrats from the guide for your Platinum Picture, Quentin Tarantino. Last but certainly not least, we have reached our final category for 2020. It's the Best Picture of 2020 for our Platinum Pictures from the guide. Number 1 is Ford vs. Ferrari, starring Matt Damon and Christian Bale. It's the tale of visionary auto designer Carroll Shelby and race car driver Ken Miles as they try to get the best performance out of a car for the Ford Motor Company as they're competing with the Ferrari in the 1966 Le Mans Raceway. Next, we have The Irishman, which we've already covered, by Martin Scorsese. Third, we have Jojo Rabbit, as we've already covered, Carthew Neal, Taku Waititi, and Chelsea Winstarley producers. Next, we have The Joker, Todd Phillips, Bradley Cooper, and Emma Tillinger-Kolsoff producers. Then we have Little Women, Amy Pascal producer. A Marriage Story with Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson, Noah Baumbach, and David Heyman producers. 1917, Sam Mendes, Pippa Harris, Jane Ann Tengren, and Colin McDougall producers. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, David Heyman, Shannon McIntosh, and Quentin Tarantino producers. Parasite, Kwak Sin Ai and Bong Joon-ho producers. Get into who we actually vote for the final Best Picture, I will want to say some interesting comments. Aside from all of the pictures that we believe missed out on different things, some amazing movies that were out there, the one thing that we will have to say this year, people actually watched a lot of the movies that were the Best Picture categories. We know that some people in previous years just hadn't watched any of them. Moonlight, even my daughter was like, she didn't even like La La Land, which got nominated for a bunch of different things. But so many of the movies out there in recent days have not been nominated. So this year, congrats to Hollywood to actually choosing some good films that have some definitely star quality and some interest to the public. At the same time, we do believe that the best pictures of the year should be the absolute best pictures of the year and not based upon whatever anyone thinks is popular, because sometimes, as in Shawshank Redemption, it takes a little while before the film gets popular. So congratulations to Hollywood on a good year, even if some people are complaining about who was missing from some of the various different categories. Without further ado, we list the Best Picture of 2020. The Best Picture of 2020 is Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. As much as we love The Joker and we love many of the various films there, and we thought 1917 was amazing, we just did not think it lived up to the level of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That doesn't mean that, of course, the Oscars won't choose to go in a different way, and far too often we know that the Oscars choose things based on a popularity contest within the Oscar community. I heard that Titanic couldn't possibly lose just because of all the people who actually worked on it. Regardless of whether you believe that to be the case, we think that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood should be the best picture of this year, and if it doesn't win, we believe you've been robbed. But we thank you and we praise you, Quentin Tarantino, and all the different people who worked on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood this year. You did an amazing job, and we look forward to seeing other films that you'll be doing in the near future. P.S. Brad Pitt, do some more character actor roles. We thank you for joining us at the Guide for the Guide's Platinum Pictures 2020, and we hope you'll be back next year as we roast all of the different pictures that will be coming out. Or maybe we'll celebrate them. One of the two. Have a good day, and you enjoy the Oscars this evening.